Hi and welcome to Power Play. I'm Mike Lecouteur. Tonight, a new Canadian presence in the Arctic.
Arctic countries need to cooperate together.
Canada has opened a new consulate in Greenland as the Danish territory's sovereignty continues to be questioned. What's the significance of opening this diplomatic mission? Governor General Mary Simon sat down with our Abigail Beeman in Nuuk. That conversation is coming up. Plus, we'll talk Arctic sovereignty with former Chief of the Defense Staff, General Tom Lawson. Then, suing over sovereignty threats.
The question is unconstitutional.
First Nations in Alberta are suing the provincial government for actions that led to a petition for a referendum on sovereignty. We'll speak with two chiefs who had a meeting with Canada's Indigenous Minister today. Plus, Team Canada effort or rogue mission of one?
MP Jamil Jivani has not reached out to me for a conversation. I'm doing my work.
Will Conservative MP Jamil Jivani's trip to Washington make a dent in trying to repair Canada-U.S. relations? Our front bench will discuss that just a little later on. We have Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, and Carl Belanger. First, though, we begin tonight with the dawn of a new era in relations between Canada and Greenland. The Canadian flag was raised and O Canada was sung at the new consulate in Nuuk this afternoon. It's a new symbol of support for the Arctic island and NATO ally Denmark. This moment had been planned for more than a year, but it takes on new significance as U.S. President Donald Trump has threatened to annex Greenland. Trump had even said that he needs it for national security of America. But he has walked some of that back after announcing a framework of a future deal with respect to Greenland. A CTV National News correspondent Abigail Beeman is in Greenland covering that story for us, and she sat down for a one-on-one interview with Governor General Mary Simon, who is also there for the opening of the consulate. Here's a part of that conversation.
I want to start by asking you, what does it mean for you to be here for the consulate opening today? And if I could ask you on two fronts, both as Canada's head of state, but also as an Inuit person.
Well, I'll deal with the Inuit person first, because my personal relationship with Greenland has been happening for a long time, and the cooperation between the Greenlandic Inuit and the Canadian Inuit has really been, long before the states started to draw lines. Inuit were going back and forth between now Canada and Denmark, Greenland. So that part is predates any real borders that were created over time. So I think what we're doing is we're building on all the work that Inuit have been doing over the last 40 years through an organization we call the Inuit Circumpolar Council, which is an international organization. And the consulate is a very important event, the opening of the Canadian consulate, because we need to continuously strengthen our bilateral ties between Canada, Denmark and Greenland, and also amongst the Inuit. Inuit are one people. We share the same language with different dialects, and we have the same culture. So this is something that's really important to us. I think the consulate will, start to look at how more trade could be undertaken between the two countries, and also, self-determination in the context of Greenland is really being done between Denmark and Greenland. So our ties are people to people, business development, cultural, education, all those issues that affect people in the communities are very important to both Greenland and Canada, the Canadian Arctic.
You met with Greenland's Prime Minister today. I'm wondering if you can share anything about how Greenlanders are feeling about threats from the United States and anything about your message about Canada's support.
Yes, I mean, I had a very good meeting with the Prime Minister. He shared with me the concerns of Greenlandic Inuit. In their language, it's Iqaluit Nunaat, which is Greenland in English. And they have been very concerned about the stories that are covered in the media and the messages that come out of Mr. Trump have been very I don't know. There's anxiety and wondering what's next. So that has been shared with me by a number of people here in Greenland, and we share their concerns. Canadian Inuit came here today to show the support to the Greenlandic Inuit in solidarity, and none of us are really immune to some of the comments that have been made over the last 8 months or so, and it's not over. It's not gone.
When you say none of us have been immune to 8 months of comments, may I ask how you have felt about 51st State comments from the American president?
Personally, I felt that it was something that shouldn't even be discussed. And I've talked to many Canadians that feel, angry and hurt about what has been said through social media or in the news. And but the great thing about it all is that it has brought us closer together as a country. In Canada, I find that the provinces and the premiers and the Prime Minister are working very closely together, and as a result of not wanting to entertain any of the comments that have been made, we just decided that we needed to come together as a strong nation and work together to avoid any kind of perception that we could be a part of the United States.
And that was CTV's Abigail Beeman in conversation with Governor General Mary Simon in Nuuk, Greenland. Now, the opening of the consulate in Greenland is sparking hopes for more collaboration on defense, not only in the face of annexation threats from the U.S., but also military threats from China and Russia. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand is calling Arctic defense a, quote, unquestionable national security priority of this government. Have a listen.
This is, of course, against a backdrop of a changing global threat environment, a volatile geopolitical environment, especially as we see Russian infrastructure moving further and further north towards the Arctic Circle. That means that Arctic countries need to cooperate together. We will be opening a consulate in Anchorage later this year. We are working closely with the Nordic Five. We call it the Nordic 5+1.
Here now to talk more about the importance of that message on Arctic sovereignty and defense is the former Chief of the Defense Staff, General Tom Lawson. Welcome back to Power Play.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
General Lawson, I wanted to pick up on what Minister Anand was just saying right there, saying that there's no doubt that the geopolitical environment is volatile right now. So what signal do you think Canada is sending today, not only to our NATO allies, but the rest of the world as well, by opening that consulate in Greenland?
Yeah, I think it's a very strong signal, and I'm very happy with it. Canada can exert its influence in several ways, of course. By deploying troops is one way, but diplomatically is another way. And I think to be together with the French, who are also opening a consulate right now, but so many other NATO nations that have stood up and sent troops into Greenland. This is the sort of partnership that that the United States can expect to face whenever they try and exert influence in areas that really aren't theirs. And I think it may pay off for Canada in other concerns to come.
I wanted to ask you, because Canada does lead exercises in the north as part of Operation Nuuk, do you think that Canada should take on a leadership role for any kind of future mission to Greenland?
Well, I'm not sure. Certainly that wouldn't be up to us. Any decision on leading exercises over there would be first Greenland and Denmark inviting us in. But yes, I think it's probably easier for Canadians to deploy into Greenland than any other NATO nation, it only being an hour hop from Iqaluit in Nunavut. So I think that we're well positioned to hop across there, but I think we should also recognize that it is more difficult for the Canadian military to deploy to and operate into our own Arctic and Arctic archipelago than it is to deploy right across to Europe. It's just very little infrastructure up there, very harsh climate, and distances that are incalculable until you overfly them. But yes, I think that if there is an idea of exercising more in Greenland, Canada is well positioned to take part in that.
Picking up on that point then, what would you like to see from this government now that we do have a foothold in Greenland and a little bit of a presence there? What do we now need to do, as Minister Anand had said, okay, maybe we're going to put a consulate in Anchorage. What more do we need to do in the north to really secure that part of the country and making sure that not only are we fending off potential threats from the north that could come from either China or Russia, but also making sure that we are securing that part of the continent, because we know that the U.S. has been asking us to do so?
Yeah, I'll pick up on the last part of what you said right there. I don't think that the threat from the Chinese or Russians has increased. I mean, I'm not given any intel anymore like I used to get, but I don't know that the threats have been increased at all any more than they were before. And that doesn't diminish the threats that the Russian long-range aviation have long represented to North America, and that threat would come up over the north. But I think to the second part of your point there, the American interest in the Canadian North has increased in much the same way it's increased in Greenland. And so to your point, what should Canada be doing up there? Well, they are starting to do the things up there that probably we should have been into decades ago. When I was Chief of Defense, Prime Minister Harper would travel up there once a year with a contingent, and it was very highly popular, and it sort of signaled where he wanted to go with the Arctic. But I don't think, certainly when you're only putting 1.2 of your gross domestic product into all of defense, there was anything left over to put up into the Arctic. We opened up a center of excellence up in the Arctic, but not much more than that. But now we have a government that is investing in the Canadian Arctic in ways that we should have been so many years ago. A fleet of constellation of satellites in highly elliptical orbit, which would give 100% communication all through the Canadian Arctic. Also provide us sensors that will allow us to know what's going on up there. We really haven't been able to detect anybody who might be in our Arctic until now. On top of that, the Canadian Army is buying 170 new vehicles that can travel around up there. More exercises. We'll have unmanned aerial vehicles, crossbow sensors up there, underwater sensors. All of these billions of dollars worth of investments are starting now. Won't be in place for some years, but they say that Canada is really serious about controlling our Arctic archipelago.
Yeah, on that investment piece, I wanted to ask you, the Liberal government is expected to release its new defense industrial strategy next week. I'm curious, what are you watching out for when it will be released?
Well, that's a very important document that's coming along, and that applies to a whole lot more than the Canadian Arctic. What I'm very interested in, as it comes out, is what areas Canada is going to be investing in, first of all, but then how they are going to proceduralize getting money onto the ground, because the Canadian procurement system has been paralytic for so many years that there needs to be a new system to allow money to get out there much more quickly. And that will include a Secretary of State or a minister who actually has the power to make decisions, take into consideration all the departments, but make decisions on behalf of the Canadian government. That's what I'm going to be listening for. The DIS will come out, and then we'll start to get an idea of how they're going to operationalize getting money onto the streets for these investments.
Okay, we're going to have to leave the conversation there. Former Chief of the Defence Staff, retired General Tom Lawson, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Still to come, First Nations in Alberta are standing up against the push for an independent Alberta. They're suing the provincial government over the petition that paves the way for a referendum on separation. We'll bring you a conversation with two chiefs when Power Play returns.
We're meeting at a very high level. We have an agreement with the people that we're meeting with that we're not disclosing the identities of the people that we're meeting with.
I don't police the responses of my MLAs. They can sign whatever petition that they want.
Alberta is a natural partner for the U.S. They have great resources. The Albertans are very independent people. Rumors that they may have a referendum on whether they want to stay in Canada or not.
These perilous times, both parties, whatever their other differences, come together against external forces that threaten our independence and against domestic policies that threaten our unity.
Well, that was a snapshot of the state of separatist sentiment in Alberta and really across this continent from the last few weeks. The province could be headed to a referendum vote if a petition on secession is successful. It was launched by a separatist group known as Alberta Prosperity Project. Now, members of the group have met with officials of the Trump administration, and one of its leaders has even claimed that petition was signed by members of Alberta Premier Daniel Smith's own caucus. Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation is suing the provincial government and Alberta's chief electoral officer, as well as Canada, over all of this. Now, Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation Chief Sheldon Sunshine and Treaty 8 Grand Chief Trevor McCurdy were in Ottawa today for high-level meetings, and they joined me in studio right after those meetings. Here's our conversation. Thank you for being here in studio, and welcome to Power Play.
Thanks for having me.
I wanted to first ask, the lawsuit names the Attorney General of Canada, the Chief Electoral Officer of Alberta, and the province. It claims that those parties have breached their legal treaty obligations. I understand that Alberta secession cannot happen without the consent of First Nations communities, but some might wonder why they can't just ask the question.
It was proven in Justice Feasy's decision on Bill 54, that we intervened, that the question is unconstitutional, and that's the reason we filed the claim and named all three parties. You know, we want the government of Canada to have their position on where they stand in all of this.
And what have they responded to so far, Chief McCurdy?
Well, the problem right now is that, you know, you had asked earlier about the question. Why can't the question be asked?
Posed, yeah.
The big problem with the question is that when we have the Premier moving goalpost, changing, having legislation to change the laws, electoral laws, and actually circumventing the courts, we have a problem with that because of the fact that you know, there's not really a clear process. And when we talk about the referendum, the question, the referendum, the question are not clear. Mm-hmm. You know, we do have interference from you know, outside parties and outside of the country that we're really worried about in Alberta. So, you know, we're very concerned that even if the referendum question is asked and there is a vote, that there's a possibility that that vote might not be taken seriously, and you know, some goalposts and some laws might be changed to rectify that as well. So it's just a never-ending movement that is really putting us in a bad position there in Alberta when it comes to our treaty and how it's implemented at this point in time.
Chief Sunshine's picking up on that issue of foreign interference. I know that you've said in this claim that the process through the passage of Bill 14 would enable foreign interference in the U.S. Why do you believe that?
We've seen what's happening in Venezuela and Greenland, the threats coming from south of the border, and we've seen the conversation around annexing Canada, become 51st state, and we take those very seriously. And when it comes to foreign interference, we've seen numerous social media posts and all those things, and some of that stuff is coming from the United States. When they have a national security strategy coming from the United States, where it is going to engage with, I guess, partners outside in other countries, that's what we're seeing today. We're seeing reports of the separatist leaders meeting with the U.S. officials, and they won't name who that is, and that's direct foreign interference. So it's not hard to put together. We see the amount of funding that these people have and utilizing, engaging in various town halls and all those, renting big spaces and all those things. And yet when Thomas Lukaszuk did his petition, they've had people sitting in their vehicles, in trucks, and doing it with minimal cost because they didn't have access to that cost. So when we see the other side of it and the amount of money that's being put into this, we definitely see that there is that opportunity for foreign interference.
In this suit, Chief McCurdy, you also underline that the Clarity Act unjustifiably violates Section 35(1) of the Constitution Act, reducing Indigenous people to essentially an afterthought in the process. Some others may look at the Clarity Act as more of a backstop, especially in this situation. Why do you not believe that that's the case?
Well, we don't trust the process right now. And the process there is being manipulated by the Premier. And when we talk about Section 35 rights and the rights of our people that are enshrined in the Constitution, we have to remember that there's a lot of history that is not taken into account when we speak about our treaties and how the provinces came to be. So when we see this talk about separation and about moving away from Canada, we have a problem with that. And it's not that we're here to essentially protect Alberta or the province of Alberta, because we have serious grievances with the province as well too. But we have to understand that it is fundamental to Canada to keep the provinces together and to make sure that we can improve the relationships that are going on between the federal, provincial, and our treaty nations. However, this is not the way. So we have a real issue with it, and legally speaking, to move in that direction without bringing the treaty partners into the question really leaves us to wonder as to how they figure they can move ahead with this type of referendum when treaties are a huge part of Alberta's history in becoming a province, and people have to understand that.
And Chief Sunshine, you had mentioned in the suit as well, but in other interviews, that alleging that the Canadian government abdicated its treaty obligations by not stopping this referendum from going forward. You did have meetings with Indigenous Services Minister Mandy Galmasti. How did those go, and do you think that there was any progress after that meeting? After
having conversation with the minister, we learned that there is a plan from the Prime Minister's office. We're not privy to what that is yet, but and that was primarily part of the reason that we came, among a lot of other things.
A plan in terms of dealing with the separation, with a possible referendum, or with the fallout from it?
I believe they're evaluating the whole situation that's happening, and I think we really emphasize that. While they might not be, if they're not taking this seriously, that they have to. We've seen, like I said, with Venezuela and Greenland, and the rhetoric that's coming from south of the border, and if there is even a vote for that matter. We anticipate that there will be a vote, potentially, but you know, in order for our nation and other nations that stepped up to provide this litigation, it should be Canada taking that step, and yet here we are putting it forward because we see a lot of harm coming to our people, a lot of like Chief said, oversight from the provincial government and federal government with recent legislations.
But following that meeting, do you feel like they're taking it seriously, the government of Canada?
I believe they're taking steps to evaluate the situation. When Minister Galmassi tells me that, I think she's sincere that they are taking steps to address it. But you know, for us, seeing what's happening globally, it is very concerning.
Just before I let you go, Chief Sunshine, when we reached out to the Alberta government about this suit, they said they wouldn't be commenting on anything specific on the lawsuit, but they did say in a statement, Alberta's government recognizes and honors treaty rights as recognized by Section 35 of the Constitution Act of 1982. What do you feel about that response and their response in general to what you've been putting forward?
When I hear that, I get the feeling that it's not sincere, just based on dealings with the Premier and their government. You know, like Chief Mercady said, that when it comes to legislations that infringe on our rights, we've seen numerous legislations coming out of the province of Alberta in the last 2 years, and the impacts that are going to have on First Nations and our treaty rights are very significant. When the Bill C-5, One Canada Economy Act, came through, it was the same thing. It was rolled right through with having First Nations as an afterthought, you know, and that's what I hope that comes out of this. We have the greatest opportunity in order to correct a lot of the wrongs and a lot of the way things were done in the past. When they do these things, create these legislations that impact our way of life, then there's a problem. Then we get on our heels and we react. And I think the time for reaction with what's happening south of the border when it comes to growing the economy, building better systems, our messaging is, let's sit down and let's go through those. We have solutions. You know, we talk about resource revenue sharing. You know, we were the original inhabitants of this land. We allowed colonization. We allowed Canada to become what it is. We allowed the provinces to become what it is. And it's time that we step back and re-engage in those. And let's fix that treaty relationship so that we are part of the solution and we can help guide Canada's economy in a good way.
Okay, we're going to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much. Sturgeon Lake Chief Sheldon Sunshine and Treaty 8 Grand Chief Trevor McCurdy. Thank you both for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, Conservative MP Jamil Jivani's trip to Washington is coming to a close. So will he come home with any wins? Our front bench is standing by to answer that question. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, and Carl Boulanger, they're all here. And they'll be right back right after this.
MP Jamil Jivani has not reached out to me for a conversation. I'm doing my work as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada and a member of the executive branch of our government. That is fully within and expected of me as a minister, and we will continue to work with the United States and with Denmark and Greenland and a host of other multilateral alliances.
As Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand today talking about Jamil Jivani's solo trade mission to Washington this week. Now, the Conservative MP's visit has generated a lot of reaction within the government, but it's also raised the question, will it help or hurt Canada's position with the Americans? Let's not forget, Jivani's a longtime friend of Vice President J.D. Vance. Now, his office has not confirmed any specific individuals that he's met with, but on social media, Jivani has said that he's met with officials at the White House and State Department. And most recently this afternoon on social media, he wrote this: Economic uncertainty and job losses are have created tough times for many in Oshawa, Clarington, and across Canada. Today, I had positive conversations about CUSMA with GM, National Association of Manufacturers, and American Automotive's Policy Council. Last stop before going home, USTR. That's also known as the United States Trade Representative, but again, it's not clear if he did have a meeting with Jamieson Greer or other people in that office. So, will Jivani's unofficial diplomatic mission move the needle on Canada-U.S. relations? Well, let's bring in our front bench. Sabrina Grover was a federal Liberal candidate in the 2021 election. She's a senior advisor at North Star Public Affairs. Melanie Paradis is former communications director to Aaron O'Toole. She's now the president of Texture Communications. And Carl Belanger also here. He's the former interim NDP national director. He's now the president of Traction Strategies. Welcome to Friday, everyone. Thanks for being here. Sabrina, I think a lot of people have been wondering, look, if Jivani was willing to help earlier, well, why didn't the Liberal government just ask him? So now we're hearing from him that he's had these positive conversations and that he does think that, things can move forward. So do you think that the Liberals waited too long, essentially, in either reaching out to him or having a conversation with him altogether?
Not at all. I think the Liberals are in government. It is Mark Carney's government, and Mark Carney is leading a strategy that employs the people that he has around him, including Dominic LeBlanc, Anita Anand, Melanie Joly, other folks around the table, around the cabinet table, as well as our diplomatic presence in the United States, which until recently, led by Ambassador Kristen Hillman. I think that the Liberals had a strategy for what they were trying to accomplish. And let's be honest here, Mark Carney's relationship with Donald Trump is pretty good, even in light of the Davos speech, even in light of some of the, harsh criticisms and harsh policies that he's put forward that respond to the United States. Mark Carney and Donald Trump seem to be on pretty good terms. And what I would ask a question back is, I understand that Jamil Jivani is a friend of J.D. Vance, but is he a friend of Pierre Poilievre? Because the entire sales of the last couple of days on the Conservative policy seems to have revolved around Jamil Jivani and his, Mickey Mouse trade mission. And while I think Pierre obviously acknowledged it and said that that was something in sale of the, in deed of his constituents, it doesn't seem like it was coordinated. It doesn't seem like it was necessarily endorsed. And it's really, I think, taken the sales out of the leader of the opposition.
Yeah, Mel, it's interesting because it's not clear what kind of coordination there was around this, either with the Liberal government or even within the opposition leader's office. I did speak to a number of Conservatives on their way into caucus on Wednesday, asking them about this, and a lot of them, or those who stopped, I should say, seemed supportive. So what is your sense of how Conservatives are seeing this within caucus right now?
So look, Jamil Jivani is someone who spent a lot of time in the United States. He went to an Ivy League school. That's where he met J.D. Vance. Under normal circumstances, it would be very normal for an MP to join a multi-partisan committee, for example, and go and have meetings in the United States, or even to, on their own, go attend a conference and take some meetings while they're there on behalf of their constituents. Under normal times, that would be a very regular nothing burger thing to have happened. And I think it's important to note here that Jamil Jivani does represent a riding, and this is Durham, Oshawa, Clarington, Bowmanville, that region, where there are thousands of jobs that are tied to the automotive industry that have taken a huge hit in the past few months, in particular, well, really over the course of a few years. And so it makes perfect sense to me that he would be lobbying on behalf of his constituents to try to bring jobs back to stop this bleed of automotive out of Ontario into the United States. Now, whether or not this was coordinated is a different conversation. In my previous role, when I ran communications in the office of the Leader of the Opposition, if an MP wanted to make an announcement or do something like this, we would coordinate with them to have a press conference to issue a statement on it. There would be maybe a stand-up with the leader at the same time. There was none of that here, so I do think this was a bit of a lone wolf move, but it doesn't mean that it wasn't without merit and that there aren't things that he could bring back that the government could learn from if they sit down and debrief with him.
It's interesting, Carl, because we asked a number of Liberals on Wednesday as well, what do you think of this? And I'll ask you the question in sort of throwing back at you what Finance Minister François-Philippe Champagne said. Is the proof in the pudding here in what he can bring back, or what meetings that we do know or don't know that he had? Because I think that's another question. Who did he meet with? He said he met with somebody at the State Department, but we don't know who. Was it Marco Rubio? Who was it?
Yeah, we don't know who, and the government of Canada doesn't know either. That's what's puzzling about it.
But he says he's willing to talk to the Prime Minister and to LeBlanc when he comes back to debrief. That's all I'm saying.
Sure, but why the communication hasn't happened before the trip? Why was there no discussion? I mean, it's not a surprise that Jivani knows J.D. Vance. We've been knowing this for a long time. He's offered to help. Why didn't we reach out? Like, why is the government not reaching out to him ahead of the trip? Why was there no line of communication established?
He did speak to LeBlanc. LeBlanc did brief him.
Sure, but Anita Anand didn't, right? Yeah. She seemed to be really dismissive of his trip, and perhaps, Jivani's too much of a loose cannon to be trusted. Maybe that's the thinking. I don't know. But if the guy is in it and can be used for leverage, maybe he should be used a little more in a little more coordinated fashion. That said, I'm not expecting him to come back with a new Kismet deal either, right? He's just a drop in the bucket when it comes to the relationship with the United States. But frankly, what he's doing is good for Jamil Jivani. So on that front, props to him.
But Sabrina, is it good for Canada too? And to Carl's point, there has been no doubt and no question. We've known this ever since J.D. Vance was nominated for vice president. And it's certainly, when he gets into the White House, we know that, okay, well, there's this connection there. So when things go sideways, like they had, and, I'll take your point that things are not going so terribly between U.S. President Donald Trump and Prime Minister Mark Carney, although the last time he referred to him, it wasn't as prime minister, it was as governor.
Well, just once,
so,
Mike. Okay.
Yeah,
just once.
For now. But I guess I come back to that question that Carl had. At what point was the Liberal government going to say, hey, Jamil, you want to help us out here maybe? Because, Team Canada has been the theme of this week here in Ottawa anyways, when you heard from former Prime Minister Jean Chrétien and former Prime Minister Stephen Harper saying we all need to unite around this problem.
Yeah, I mean, I would say overall, I think the last 12 months have really been a learning experience in navigating Donald Trump 2.0 and the White House administration. And there is no clear path, and every day is a new day. Sometimes you hear from Pete Hegseth, sometimes you hear from Howard Lutnick, sometimes you hear from Donald Trump. I don't even know how much influence J.D. Vance has in the White House. Every day is a new day. So I think that
and he's vice president.
Sure. But I don't know how much that matters to Donald Trump. But I think, so I think for Canada, it has been a learning experience. And certainly in that learning experience, we've had lots of people reach out to the United States on their own, right? I think Danielle Smith has done that. You've seen Doug Ford do the same in hosting joint press conferences with governors down south. So I think there has been a lot of engagement, but that's all been coordinated. And I think I'm not sure that Jamil either presented this in a coordinated fashion. I agree your point, Dominic LeBlanc did brief him, which is great. But up to this point, the Conservatives haven't been overly collaborative. I think this week was the first week we saw Pierre Poilievre, put out an olive branch and say, let's have a meeting with Mark Carney and actually move things forward, which is great. So maybe in the future we'll see more of that. But this trip orchestrated on its own doesn't seem coordinated. It doesn't seem necessarily like it brought back tons of stuff, except for maybe some of the relationship pieces we already knew he had.
Okay, we got to leave that right there. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we do come back, though, rhetoric versus reality. The Canadian economy lost 25,000 jobs in January, even though this government says it's laser focused on making sure that Canadians are able to be in the workforce. Stay with us. We're going to talk about that when we come back.
Stellantis is making a financial decision. They're still going to use their batteries for their vehicles. LG is going to hold on to the 800 employees there. And I think it was a good business decision.
I think it's really good news. I think that it's very welcome. And it shows that LG is here for a long run. We will invest in those who invest in us. And what do I mean by that? We just signed a partnership with Korea on auto manufacturing last week. What are we seeing this week? LG is buying out Stellantis to invest more in Canada. Good news.
That was Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Federal Industry Minister Melanie Joly welcoming the news that Stellantis is selling its stake in an Ontario battery manufacturing plant. The move would see ownership of the new battery plant transferred to LG Energy Solution. Now, the plant employs over 1,300 workers with hopes of scaling up to 2,500. You may remember the federal government is already going after Stellantis to recoup incentive funding. That was after the company announced that in the fall, they would not be building the Jeep Compass in Brampton as planned. Instead, they're moving that production to Illinois. The new job numbers out today reflect the hits that keep coming for the manufacturing sector. New numbers show that Canada lost about 25,000 jobs in January. It marks the first net loss of jobs nationwide since August of last year. Of note, the manufacturing industry shed 28,000 workers last month, which largely was concentrated in Ontario. Now, despite all those losses, StatsCan says the unemployment rate still dropped, or still stayed around dropped to 6.5%. It comes on the same day that the Ontario government put out this ad.
We're fighting to defend every job in auto, steel, and forestry. And we're building to grow, creating new opportunities for workers no matter what.
So a big push for more jobs in Ontario, and all of this in a week when the Carney government unveiled a new auto strategy, which the Prime Minister says is meant to protect jobs. So at what point does the federal government have to show progress on the labor front? Let's ask the front batch and make sure that we can unpack this rhetoric versus reality. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, and Carl Boulanger. Melanie, let's start with you. How much pressure is on this government right now to show results when it comes to jobs in this country?
All of it. All the pressure is on the government right now. I mean, it feels like we've been talking about this for months now, and there hasn't been an awful lot of progress. And announcements like this today make that even more difficult for the Carney government to show wins, and they really need to if they want to hold on to the support of the Canadian public. I think that the pointy elbow stuff has worn off. The veneer has worn off a bit on this government, and Canadians are starting to see for themselves that perhaps there's no there, and that's alarming. Look, Ontario has been doing a really great job of diversifying the manufacturing base. They're seeking to attract more investment in defense manufacturing, for example. So yes, of course, automotive is going to continue to be a really important part of the manufacturing base in Ontario, and we need to do more to attract automotive manufacturing back to Ontario and stop it from bleeding to the United States. But there are other areas for manufacturing where Canada can really lead, where Ontario can lead, and defense manufacturing is certainly one of those things. And it ties in really well to our critical minerals base, because the same resources that we're mining in Northern Ontario that we need for EV manufacturing in Southern Ontario, we also need for the defense industry. So certainly Ontario remains on the right track, but this is a difficult moment, and it's incumbent on the federal government to really help the province out.
And Carl, we have the defense industry strategy. It's supposed to be released next week. But I mean, all of these things, or a lot of these things that the government is announcing, are really kind of more long term. They're really not sort of looking at the jobs right now, or the things that they're putting in the window aren't affecting the jobs right now. How important is it to do things in the short term?
Here's the thing. Most families live in the now. And that's the problem, right? So, we're going to have good jobs in a few months, in a few years. People need to pay their bills now, and this is the issue for the Carney government. The clock is ticking. That's why they need results on with the United States when it comes to CUSMA. That's why they need to attract some investments here. So the Stellantis example is interesting because obviously LG will keep that plant running, and they're planning to invest. But if it was such good news, you would think that Melanie Joly and Doug Ford would have told their body language, right? It's like, oh, this is great news. I couldn't be happier, And this is a plant that's worth $5 billion, and they sold it for $100. I mean, I had $200. You could have asked me. I would have chipped in,
Yeah. I didn't know that they thought you were a prospective buyer, frankly. But Sabrina, something that I saw yesterday is interesting. Bank of Canada Governor Tiff Macklem gave a speech entitled Structural Change, Canada at a Crossroads, where he mentioned that AI would be boosting youth unemployment because in some cases it's eliminated entry-level jobs. So what do you think is the political consequence to that, especially with the youth vote and, you know, the possibility of an election coming this spring? I think that is the biggest rumor in Ottawa, you know, that it'll happen either this spring or, you know, in the near future. You know, how key is this question going to be for the federal government, especially with the youth vote?
Yeah, I mean, I come from a province that routinely faces massive job losses, you know, because we have for so long been on that roller coaster industry that is oil and gas and energy. And it almost feels like manufacturing in Ontario is starting to move into that roller coaster pipeline because of our relationship with the United States. And as we, over the next, not just like 2 years, but over the next 5-10 years, reestablish trading relationships with other countries and reestablish manufacturing, you know, supply chains and whatnot. So I think that that's what's happening, and it's been devastating in Alberta, and it's tough to recoup. But you need to invest not just in jobs and trying to bring back old jobs, but you need to invest in training and upskilling. And I think for young people, that might be something that's interesting, right? I know that they're coming off of a post-secondary degree or some sort of education, but is that education relevant to the job market today? Does it apply to how artificial intelligence is being used? And I think those are the kinds of questions that governments need to ask themselves when you go deep into policy and you actually decide what are solutions here. When it comes to the politics of it, I think certainly the government's biggest political concerns here are not just the job losses, but the structural debt of households. I think it makes up like 4% of our GDP. That ties back to the affordability. Those are all going to be problems that the Mark Carney government's going to have to answer. And, you know, while I think temporary measures like the GST rebate we saw last week is going to be helpful, it's certainly not going to fix the structural issues. So I think that they are going to have to start to think about that. Politically, I think one of the things that's interesting is, like, of course, they've lost a bit of the youth vote, but they've gained in seniors and in the elderly crowd. And so it's interesting to see how that shift has happened between the Liberals and Conservatives and how that plays out in any future election.
Okay, Mel, I'm going to give you the last 20 seconds here.
Well, the youth vote is already behind Pierre Poilievre, and I think that this just galvanizes that, because the Canadian dream is so much farther away for them. And we have to remember that this is the demographic that was the most impacted by COVID lockdowns, because they were kept home from school, and much of their social development and their ability to get jobs when they were younger was severely impacted, which continues to impact them today on the job market because they don't have the same experience.
Yeah. Okay. We got to leave it there. Sabrina Grover, Melanie Paradis, and Carl Boulanger, thank you all for being here. Stick with us. Our takeaway is right after this. Welcome back to Power Play. As we leave you tonight, we want to take you back to Greenland. That's where Canada raised its flag high at this new diplomatic outpost this afternoon as the crowd sang, "O Canada." The ceremony was attended by Governor General Mary Simon and our Foreign Affairs Minister. We'll have more coverage of that all evening on CTV News. And that is your Power Play week in politics. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. I'm Mike Lecouture. Have yourselves a great weekend, but stay tuned to CTV News Channel because today's top headlines are just ahead.